Okay, better late than never, everyone. We're having the All Blacks versus Fiji Yelp review of the game. A little bit about the game, obviously. Preview this weekend, and also some kind of saucy news coming out of New South Wales. Excited to get into it, y'all. Sorry for being so late. We're about 3 weeks off, but hopefully we'll be on a better schedule. Life happens. Let's get into it.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard it gets.
Tucci-Zala, back to Baker, Baker with the fit. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the On the Line of Rugby podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Nagaishi, and welcome back. As I said in the cold open, life happens. A little bit, 3 weeks late. It's not the end of the world, I guess, I hope. But more on that in a little bit. Just not really a lot of things to talk about, unfortunately, and kind of needed the break. But overall, excited to break down a little bit of the Rugby Championship Week 1. We obviously have a couple scandals that I think I'll get into this week. A little bit of sacrilege here and there. Also a little bit of Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch from my USC football fans, nepotism going on, I think, in the Warthog's coaching room, as well as the signings that the Melbourne Rebels castoffs are going to. So let's start off with the Yelp review, I guess. And I think for a lot of this involvement, at least in the All Blacks versus Fiji game, just kind of needs a little bit of context. So overall, as for MLR standards, I thought it was much better than I hoped. I think they put in a lot of effort to really make Snapdragon Stadium a home for, at least the majority of the fans who decided to come early. I think everyone came for merch or to drink outside of the Fan Fest, just because the lines for merch, I couldn't even get any despite having 4 quadrants of the stadium all being filled with merch tents. The merch was good. I think it was very decently priced, all things considered. I was kind of hoping that they wouldn't go for the World Rugby Shop standards, but luckily they didn't. I think they went for like kind of the New Zealand conversion, which is like $80-90, maybe $100 for a jersey. So not too bad. I would say that compared to an MLR game, it was definitely above and beyond what I would have expected, especially compared to the MLR final that just happened this weekend. Shout out to the Free Jacks for going back-to-back. That game was terrible. I really thought the Seawolves would have took it, but we won't be talking about that today. Overall, I really thought that the just overall stadium vibe, despite a lot of people not really coming for the early game, at least pregame festivities wasn't really that big. Fan Fest was okay. I think they had like one band playing outside, and like I don't even know who they were. Let's see, what else did they have? They had nothing really going on in the stadium, just open, obviously just take your seats and drink. So that was okay, I guess, for a small venue like Snapdragon. I think the other biggest thing was just the proper respect for the haka and the CB towel should not be impressive, but I guess it is given the recent outlooks for the haka, at least in terms of other stadiums. Obviously, I think a lot of Americans love the All Blacks. I think they know them just for that, mostly in general. I think the people who were sitting next to us were like business executives who only came because one of the guys was cute and they heard of the haka. So should show you what the American public that doesn't really know what rugby is at least coming to these games, and that's great. I think that really shows in the attendance. I think the MLR final, which in my opinion was probably the best slated lineup in probably the last 4 or 5 years that the MLR has been going, only had like I think 11,000, a little over, and that was their record. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was somewhere between 34 and 38,000, so roughly about 4 times that, obviously like 3.5 and change. But I thought it was really well done though, at least in general, having all the fans together. That was my first experience at Snapdragon. I really liked the layout of the stadium, the way everyone, and especially in the bleeds down, could get great seats. I got personally great seats. I think we're like 9 rows from the end zone, right behind the goalpost. That was really cool. Pre-sale was really cheap. I really thought that they did a great job in engrossing a lot of the USA players and coaching staff into that, just to get pre-sale for like what I think I would paid like $100 for the tickets for 2 of them for me and my girl, and I'm sure it was $20 for like bleeds. So it's really not that bad. Obviously, after pre-sale, it kind of got outrageous, but Overall, I think that the game presentation was solid. I hated that the announcer and the PA guy kept butchering the names. Um, I guess because you're American, I can't really knock you, but I figured with at least a couple foreigners here and there playing on at least every MLR squad that comes to San Diego, they would have it a little bit better down. But such is life. It was really cool seeing the Sky Sports crew. For all those who don't know, I did an internship with them a while back. Um, it was nice to see the old boys back in the end zone. And also along that, I really thought that the halftime festivities were a little lacking. I think overall, if you're looking at halftime festivities in comparison to the MLR, which obviously have had, let's see, Steve Aoki, they've had Marshmello this year, among other people. Some of them only came for the halftime show because they thought it was Marshmello. And I'm sure these are just business executives from San Diego who just wanted to see a dubstep show. But overall, it wasn't good. I expected a little bit more out of it. I mean, they had a cool flyover with I think a couple F-35s, and they had the whole flag thing, and they had America the Beautiful. I thought that was sick. Very pageantry. Felt kind of like the Rose Bowl, just a little bit, but obviously the Rose Bowl had way better halftime festivities than anything that you could get here. I believe it was some synchronized light show that didn't work out, so they ended up just cutting it 5 minutes in, and there was just nothing after that. Kind of but whatever, maybe you could have afforded a drone show. San Diego is big on drones. I would have expected that at least, or maybe some I don't know, some San Diego or LA affiliated artist. If you want to keep to the electronic mold, I guess someone along that mold also from the West Coast, but I guess not. That being the case, though, the game was obviously really good. I really thought that I love seeing. That being said, though, I thought the game was really good. I really liked. That being said, though, I think it was understandable that after the post game, obviously, I think they were going back on the flight the same night, came back to New Zealand the next morning, that they weren't doing a lot of fan appreciation things outside of the the normal clap and trot. But I guess I must have been among at least third of the stadium that stuck around for hopefulness, at least for a photo. But such is life, I guess. You're not going to see them all the time, but understandable they have to get on their flight. So at least I'm not alone in that concept, but whatever. Going on for the game, at least, I thought it was really cool to see a lot of these guys live and in person, just to see their game speed, and not only that, but just their ability to kind of challenge and analyze every inch of the field. Obviously, Bowden Barrett, I think, really inserted himself into all facets from the 15th spot. He almost nabbed, I want to say, 4 try assists, but 2 of them were called back, so officially only 2. Had a lot of open passing, great moments along. And on top of that, just great play and form. I think he's continuing that form going into the Rugby Championship, and possibly hoping and praying they'll put him at 10. I know they probably wouldn't. They probably put DMAC, but hopes and dreams. Fiji brought, I think, a lot of physicality, but I think, unfortunately, they just had too much penalties, specifically on knock-ons and not releasing at breakdowns, or even, I think they had one obstruction that cost them a try, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Just, it honestly, again, kind of knock-on for mold for the Fijians, just it kind of what should be expected. But it was a little disappointing. I think that game was a blowout before the half even started. I kind of hoped that they would come back. I believe at that point it was 28-7, and they obviously had a shot. I think they pushed really hard in the second half, and I think they just ran out of gas after 60 minutes. That last 20 minutes was kind of painful for them. Overall, I think the last thing I really took away was the all black ball retention, which I think was great, very Crusader-esque. Obviously, with Razor being there, it kind of probably helps. And discipline really saved them during the game. But, I can't forget to give Semi and Salesini Ravutamanda a little bit of flowers, just because in that second half, they were among everything, whether it was passing, taking big line breaks. I think Semi had a huge, 40 or 50 meter line break that broke during the 60th minute that almost got them over the line, and unfortunately just didn't cut it. So being that as it may, I thought it was really cool to see them play, but better luck next time to the Fijians. Overall, as I said, great fan engrossment. I really hope that they'll learn from this and level up for the next one. Maybe have it in LA this time, not cough bias because I live here, but it would be nice if they had it in a larger stadium like SoFi or the Coliseum. They'll probably have it for that in the World Cup, but here's the hoping and praying, I guess. San Diego is a big rugby community, so I think that's why they held it there, and it makes sense to hype up for the final for the next week. Overall, I think I would give the experience probably like a 3.5 out of 5. I think if the halftime show was better, that would definitely bring it up to a 4. And obviously, not having a little bit of fan appreciation after the game kind of hurt that review, but not as much as the halftime show did. Being that as it may, though, let's move on. So outside of that, the biggest thing I think was the Melbourne Rebels castoffs getting signed, and obviously the Waratahs support staff announced. We'll go over the signings now. Obviously, the biggest ones would be Lukan Salakaia-Loto going back to the Reds. I think this is a great deal of improvement for them. They've been lacking on set piece ever since him and Nella Tupou have left. They've done a good job in shoring that up. Salakaia-Loto probably could have been the forward of the year, in my personal opinion, for that spot for Australia. He did a damn good job at doing everything right, and especially bringing the physicality. And I think the Reds have been missing that desperately, especially with losses of Harry Wilson and Fraser McWright for part of the season. If you're looking at the Taz, they got great signings from obviously Rob Leota. They got Darby Lancaster, who they needed desperate help for. It's one of my biggest talking points for the Waratahs. They needed help in the back line. Just putting him back there with Dylan Page and friends, especially with Max Jorgensen, I think will make a huge deal of improvement. The two young guys balling it out in the back end it kind of erases the loss of Mark Nawani-Tawase. And Darby Lancaster, I think, is a much better defender than Mark Nawani-Tawase ever could be. If you're looking holistically at his career, at least within the last year, he's done everything from getting into breakdowns with the forwards, trying to go for turnover ball, being a great jackal, and obviously just being a good selfless teammate, especially when he doesn't have the ball. At least late during the year, he didn't really get the ball as much as he probably should have. And a lot of it, he took some massive hits to really get those balls out to the right people to end up at least getting a chance at scoring. So bringing in Darby Lancaster, big deal of improvement. I think the biggest improvement for them was in the 4-pack. They talked about physicality and the lack thereof of it last year, and I think it was very apparent. And I think bringing in these two guys is going to help big time. Obviously, they have probably a couple more on the way, but this is a start. You sign your two bookend players at the front end and at the back row, Nella Tupou and Rob Leota. I think for Rob Leota and both him and Tupou, really, I mean, if you're looking at holistically career-wise, their best years are probably behind them. But if you're looking at, you'll get at least a good 4 to 5 years on the back end of just pure awesomeness. Rob Leota, obviously he brings that stability. He brings that leadership position into the locker room, but he brings a lot in terms of ball carrying. Last year, personal opinion, at least he was probably one of his better years over the last few years, like 4 to 5 years in that spot, probably since 2018 and 2019, in terms of ball running, meters past the game line, and physicality, especially on defense. Did a great job when he was healthy, especially with the absence of Brad Wilkin for a majority of the year. Nella Tupou, we all know what he can do, especially in the, you're looking at 40 to 60 minute Nella Tupou now versus 20 to 40, which is what you used to get. So all things considered, if they can keep him healthy, he's going to be a freak. Him and Angus Bell, obviously with the loss of, I believe they lost Harry Johnson Holmes this offseason. I think it basically erases that loss. In fact, they better of with that loss, just because Harry Johnson Holmes could not do the type of things that Nella Tupou can do. Obviously, health barring, Harry Johnson Holmes is basically always available. But given that they could run the table with this, and I really like the stability that they both bring in terms of performance and ceiling that come into the Waratahs locker room. I expect them, and I will talk about this in future episodes, that they will at least have a better shot at getting back into the semifinal range of Super Rugby Australia, just for that in general. But we'll discuss that at a later date. As for the Waratahs support staff, here's what we got. So their 3 coaches got announced this week. It's going to be Mike Catt, Dan Palmer, and Lachlan McCaffrey. Now, overall, I personally like Mike Catt just because I know him as a coach going back to his days at Ireland, seeing the kind of development he did. But we'll go over each of them now. We'll start off with Catt, obviously, since I mentioned him. Obviously, he played 75 tests for England, had a distinguished playing career. He will be the attack coach for this team that he recently did for Ireland. I believe he did that for Italy, and he was a support during Stuart Lancaster's England career for 2012 to 2015. Basically, pretty solid guy. I mean, he retired in the 2003 World Cup, and he's really done a good job at enhancing the attack for Ireland over the last, 4 to 5 years. So I think he just left after this year's Six Nations. Did a great job. I really think Ireland under Andy Farrell, attacking wise, has been one of the most innovative teams around the world. And I think Cat could have been a big part of that. As for Dan Palmer, he's going to be the assistant coach for set piece. He will be sharing that duty with McCaffrey. You know, if you're looking at it, both of these guys, McCaffrey and Palmer, were both mentored by Dan McKellar with the Brumbies and with the Tigers. I don't know as to what position they were in. I couldn't really find that online. I will do my best to dig into that more in a future episode, and if I find anything, talk about it with you guys. But they've both been coaches for Australia A, specifically with Palmer. They've both donned the Waratah jersey at different points, but specifically for Palmer in 2008 to 2010 seasons, and he was a Wallaby for like 1 year. So that's like, okay. As for McCaffrey, he'll be mostly on defense, but will be assisting the set piece. And I think he is experiencing differing play styles, which I think is unique. Obviously, he's had stints in the UK, Japan, and in the MLR. So that's a good realm of different cultures experience and like whether or not what to use for attack. I just hope it's not like a Clay Helton USC era where it's kind of just like a hodgepodge gumbo, as my friend, former editor Dan used to call it, of, you know, all of his experiences. I just hope that it's like, you know, a unified book that at least works with the scheme. I think that was the one thing that USC was missing at the times, and the Waratahs could be in the same boat, just without the talent that USC had in terms of football standards. Other than that, McCaffrey is coach for Otago as an assistant coach, and a provincial team, the Gungahlin Eagles. I probably butchered that, but, you know, such is life in the notes. Overall, I personally would have gone outside of the family. You can consider that the family as just the alumni group, friends of coaches, etc., former coaches even as well. I think it's always good to go outside of the family in record, whether you're looking at basketball, football, rugby. If you're looking outside of that realm, like, for example, I think a good one would be Joe Schmidt to Australia, just as a recent example. If you're looking at it overall, Joe Schmidt has, you know, is a New Zealander. He's a Kiwi. He is coached in Ireland. He was a great coach in Ireland. He's coached the All Blacks to basically perfection on offense. I think this was a revival for them when he was there. And now he goes to a different code, basically in Australia, where it's a different ball game. And outside of the family, I think bringing a lot of these guys in, like Dan McKellar and Dan Palmer and Lachlan McCaffrey, are all basically more or less more of the same. I liked what they did with their player development staff, as I've said. And obviously bringing Mike Cat in is a huge, huge improvement than what they previously had. They let go of a lot of staff members from team managers on up, especially in strength conditioning, for better or for worse. So I don't know why you wouldn't just clean house and bring in another group who hasn't played in Australia, or if they had, play for like a totally different team, you know, maybe the Brumbies, maybe the Reds. I don't know. You could have brought in anybody. Maybe the Waratahs budget was not as good, and that was why they could only afford these guys. But almost, it kind of feels like, again, that Lincoln Riley Alex Gurge situation. I'm bringing in my homies who have been under my staffs for X amount of teams. You know, they're not the greatest, but, you know, they'll do something. And as I've said with the Leicester Tigers review, you know, it's not a good look to bring in anybody from that staff, especially after the terrible reviews you got from players and from the media. So, I guess this isn't like a Nick Saban, you know, what's the word, rehab for coaches department. You know, you're not a great, I would consider a lauded coach, I guess. So you wouldn't necessarily have the credentials to bring in these like low key dudes and like kind of mentor them up. So this is either going to be great or bad for them. I think Cat definitely carries this lineup just in general in terms of initial resume and impressions. Obviously, he has a great international record with Andy Farrell, but I would say he has had relatively mixed results. with Stuart Lancaster's England and the Italians. If you're looking over the film over them for their attack, I would say the best bet he has was with Stuart Lancaster's England career. The Italians are okay. I think they really only blossom now due to multiple reasons. But I think those are best described in Squid Rugby's video, so I would say go watch that if you guys do not know what I'm talking about in that regard. As for the others like Palmer and McCaffrey, I think good wise, if I'm not being a devil's advocate, I would say the others rep, those two guys with the Brumbies especially, is a pretty good line, but again, kind of could be nepotism, and also they didn't really necessarily have the greatest resumes outside of that, and their roles within the Brumbies is not necessarily the greatest known, especially given that McKellar was the attack coach at the time for his first stint at the Brumbies and then head coach later. Overall, though, I think it could have been much better, like the McKellar hire, as I've said before, but I could be proven wrong just because of, guys have a second chance. You could just be the Brumbies. You never really know what card this is. It's kind of like a Forrest Gump situation where you don't know what you're going to get till you get it. So hopefully this first year is going to be solid. I really hope that the Fiji lack of physical or emphasis in physicality from their director of pathways and performance will definitely help. And maybe that'll carry that over, but it's kind of just yet to be seen. Overall, I mean, I think I'm still high on the Taz, just given the signings and their ability to perform and the hope and prayer that they kind of work out the way the Brumbies did, but you never really know. So let's move on though. Overall, this will be our TRC preview. I think I'll go over the All Blacks versus Argentina. Again, for this one, they didn't release lineups as of tonight. As of this recording on Wednesday afternoon, they'll probably release it Wednesday or Thursday night. Game for us in America time, I believe, is Friday. So we'll see about that. As for just the overall look of the match, I really think to me this is the biggest test for Razor. You're facing the World Cup repeats in the block, and you're facing the two teams who have always had their number prior. Australia, despite their lacking in New Zealand soil, has been pretty effective overall, and especially with Joe Schmidt's revival of this team, it'll be an interesting match in this season. And also, Argentina and the Pumas have always had their number. I believe they've been on a losing streak for them recently for a pretty long while, for at least since the Ian Foster review. So hope and pray that Razor can come back with this. As I've said, you can really only predict the highlights just so that the lineup. I really think that the All Blacks will look to blood in new talent in the starting lineup with a bunch of vets off the bench with some supporting. I think bringing in a guy like Sam Cane in the loose forwards is really going to help with that, especially with Wallace Atiti's development. But we'll talk about him a little bit later. As for the vets off the bench, I think they'll get in an early entrance, probably in like the first 5 to 10 minutes of the second half, as with Fiji. I would really expect them to really try to blood in these guys just for their physicality at the breakdown, which is going to be really needed, especially against a Argentinian team that loves to get physical, especially Pablo Matera and those boys. They will get nasty. Chocobars especially too. Ooh. You're looking at probably getting Sam Derry in the starting lineup, Tamaiti Williams in the starting lineup, Noah Hotham, Wallace Atiti, Billy Proctor, and Ruben Love especially. I think having Ruben Love at 15 or 10 would be kind of interesting. I don't know if they'll ever do it, at least at 10. They'll probably put BMAC or Bowden at 10, but having him at 15 would be really nice to see. That's my hope. Most people would probably say he's coming off the bench, but that's just me. I love throwing hot takes in there. So we'll just sprinkle that in, Salt-based style. We'll go from there. Billy did a great job, especially in his debut really against Fiji. I thought he did a great job overall, just not only running great lines, playing good defense, helping out on the breakdown, doing everything a center does, and it does especially well. Hotham too, game management was insane. Obviously, he had a little bit of screw-ups, but that's going to happen when you get blooded. Wallace, good, and I mean effective job. Watching him on Super Rugby on TV versus seeing him in person, he's a different dude, especially in space. You give him a little bit, he'll take a mile out of you. I think he took like a 30-meter push just because of a great run by, I believe it was Tanya Lotua, the replacement prop from the Hurricanes. I'm totally blanking on his name. Tamaiti Williams, I think, will be great in the starting front row, especially against, guys like T. Williams especially will be a great job against that front row. He brings that. He's the largest All Black in history, I believe. He brings a lot of physicality, and he's a great ball runner. Great. Sam Derry, good at the lineout, great physicality, perfect. As long as he stays healthy, perfect. I really think that the Pumas will try to bring more of a veteran presence and really capitalize on their strong URC performance, especially from Chocobaras, who I have as my X factor along with Ruben Love. You know, if you're looking at it, Chocobaras, especially with Toulon, had a great final, as I've talked about, versus Leinster. Great. Words cannot say how stupid Leinster was to try to challenge him, especially in the middle, after what he did repeatedly, and expect different results. The definition of insanity. This guy is probably going to be the future of Argentinian rugby, and I think it's only just begun to see what his prime can do. Overall, I think the battle will be decided in the centers, again, with Chocobars probably landing in the 13 jersey against the All Blacks, who probably, hopefully with Jason Ryan, have worked in their breakdown work and should be a decent bout for them on the trot in that regard. I think the forward packs will be, if they go with the lineup I expect them to go to, will be pretty evenly matched. You know, a little bit, maybe toss in 2 or 3 rookies, you know, maybe put Wallace in starting lineup to Mighty and Sam Derry, and the rest be, you know, vets. You know, you bring in a guy like Asaf Almua and friends, kind of bring in that stability into that lineup. Sam Kane at 7, I think will be great. It'll be an interesting ride. I think they'll be pretty good, evenly matched. If the centers like Billy Proctor and friends or Antonina Brown cannot hold it down, I think this is where it'll go down, especially late in the game. I think they will continue to try to do a little too much hands on the line. They did that against Fiji. They did that against England. I wasn't exactly liking that at all. But hopefully they kind of narrowed that down. You know, I know you want to go off of talent. I know you just kind of want to be that flying Fijian flair, but no, just no, you're not the Fijians. You're the All Blacks. Maybe keep it a little bit more structured. When they started leaning towards that late in the second half, especially versus Fiji, it obviously went out well. Same thing with England. So if they do that, I think they'll be fine. As for their rest of the game, I think proper play arrogance is going to be key. You know, instead of coming into the game thinking that, oh, they have our number, or, oh, we're totally going to have revenge on them, maybe come in with a little bit more level head. I hope Razor will bring that in. You know, he does a good job of incorporating a lot of mental intangibles into his lineups, especially with his younger developmental players. So hopefully that'll be the new mindset coming into this game. A rookie, do your magic. I hope and pray you can figure this out. Overall, I wouldn't be surprised if the Pumas win this game, or even maybe cross my fingers, split the series. You know, it could be a drop goal, maybe a final conversion at the brink. You know, maybe it's Chocobar's pick 6. Who knows? Maybe Pablo Matera scores a great late turnover and they end up with a drop goal. That's what I would hope, and I would say it's at least going to be a +2 to 3 win for the Pumas for this one, especially in, I believe it's in Dunedin, so in the zoo. It's gonna be a great time. Overall, South Africa versus Australia, they were going to be playing in Brisbane, which is an interesting choice. I probably would have went for, you know, if you wanted to really rub it into the Rebels as they did against Wales, and maybe throw it in Melbourne, throw it in Queensland. I don't know. Have a little hope and dream, but such is life. I guess they might want to spread it out. Overall with the lineup, at least with the box which was released, I do like a little bit of old and new. With Eldrick Lowe, I thought he was a standout during the URC. He's going to be great at 8, taking over the nod for Quagga. And Handre and Grant Williams on the bench is kind of genius. You know, Grant can play in a litany of roles. He's the only back on the bench with Handre. Obviously, Handre's going to slot into 10 when he comes off, hopefully at the 60th minute, just to kind of bring that stability and kind of narrow in that margin. Having the bomb squad go with basically a whole new front row and a whole new back row is a welcome surprise. I think they're bringing in Ben Jason Dixon, Quagga Smith, and Mako van Staden. Great choices off the bench. Quagga, obviously, again, very good utility, can basically play anywhere. Mako van Staden can play what I believe hooker. I want to say he can play maybe shadow moonlighted prop, and obviously play at loose forward. It's going to be an interesting ride with that. So they bring in a lot of versatility. No locks, though, is kind of an interesting ride. Obviously, with the new 10 for the Bach, it's going to be really, really interesting because I believe his name is Feinberg. I haven't watched enough film of him. I probably should going into this match, at least after the announcement of the squads. So I'll do that and check back in with you guys on the recap of this week. But rumors are Ben Donaldson is at 10 for the Wallabies. Very surprising indeed. I think he kind of earned it. If you're looking at the 10s for the Wallabies outside of Lolesio, there really isn't a lot. And I think his talents are being very mismanaged, putting him at 15. So put him back at 10 where he belongs, and let's see what happens. Excuse me. Overall, I think the other biggest thing was getting Marika out of retirement. Joe Schmidt, I don't know what voodoo you're doing, but to get this guy out of retirement, he's him. I'm pretty sure he watched on TV like everybody else how well they did against Wales, and hopefully just, you know, either gave Joe a ring or Joe kind of, you know, hit the Rolodex of the old players and just kind of brought him back. So it'll be interesting to see. I really think he'll definitely start in this week. I would expect a backline of Tate, Ben, Marika Corbelli, either Hunter Paisami or Lenny Igitau at 12. I want to see Dungunu at 13. I don't know if I will. On the squad site, they have him listed as a wing. I think that is a very, very bad misuse of his powers. He can play at 13 and really diversify this lineup and spread the field. I think it opens up a lot more opportunities for guys like Dylan Page, who really didn't get I would say, a fair go at taking a Wallaby spot and have him debut really in the starting lineup as what he is. And he can be a freak when you give him the chance. He can be almost a Filippo Dungunu, poor man's white Filippo Dungunu off of the 14 spot. I think he'll be a good job just because he can play it. Like I've said in all this time in Super Rugby, the forward and the back on the wing, which is beautiful. And obviously having Andrew Kellaway at 15, although you could put Tom Wright in there, I wouldn't knock it, but I think Kellaway would be a better fit versus South Africa just because of his natural ability for kicking and kind of holding it down, for diversifying his ball handling skills. I would expect a lot of the focus of this game, obviously on the breakdown. I think a monkey could have told you that and probably would have been correct. But I think you really need to look into having Will Skelton, who will probably get into the starting lineup, and Lukan Salakaya-Loto really hanging in that 5 jersey. I think will be a great opportunity for them to really hold it down. Obviously, they're going to bring in the oomph and tons of center interplay with the forwards, especially if Dungunu is there, will be king. I have lots of hope for this. Obviously, I think they are coming into a very hostile environment. Brisbane is not the greatest place for them. The Wallabies have 10 out of 11 wins at Brisbane and 12 over 15 matches over the last 3 years versus the Block. A lot of it, again, Quade Cooper, who wasn't named to the squad, but hopes and dreams that they'll keep that record. As much as I like the Block, I'm going to have to say Australia really takes this. If I was a betting man, of a +2 through 5 margin for the Wallabies, I think it could be either a misconversion by the Block or a last-second try late, maybe Dylan Pager and, Dungunu's going to play the whole 80. Maybe Dungunu runs the whole length of the field like he did versus Wales and just runs over people and takes it in to the corner. Who knows? But that's really it I think I have for this week. Thank you guys all for showing up again. Sorry again for being late. And for next week on our docket, we'll have the round 1 recap and a couple interesting topics that I think we need to discuss. Overall, thank you guys for showing up again. See you next time. Peace.